Okay, here we are in our close of this opening semester. And as I introduced to you last week, when we were looking at the phases of initiation, that my real interest is in establishing an understanding of gate continuity, and gate continuity as we see it in the way in which it operates through a quarter. And of course here we're dealing with the phases of civilization. Let me just get this illustration up. And again we have this lovely complexity. I'm particularly enamored by this image of the way in which this quarter operates. A real understanding of the impact of the yin-yin, that is the quarter binary, and the perspective of the throat. I mean, there's a couple of hanging gates out of the G, and obviously there is the root center, but the vast majority of the 16 gates, as a matter of fact 11 of the 16 gates, are in the throat center. And I've had the privilege to teach at many levels in this semester, and it was very interesting. I've been doing some very, very strange things in rave cosmology, looking at just looking at possibilities of evolutionary changes in the dynamics of forms. And the one thing to really understand about what it is to be a nine-centered being is that it's all about the throat in the end. It's all about the throat in the sense that, this is the key. It is the key to the way in which the program operates the life force on the planet. That is the illusion of manifestation and the vanity that goes with that. It is a key in understanding what is essential as an ingredient that binds all of us, which is our capacity to speak and our capacity to do. The throat is a dominant force. It brings things into form. And so, it is something to understand about the power of civilization. Yes, it's another 16 gates, but in essence, when you see it translated into the body graph, because it totally dominates the throat center, that is, there is no other quarter that has an influence on the throat, that one has to see there is this enormous power that is here in civilization. That is, it is a controlling agency. And in the end, it is, I guess it's not such a big statement to say that in the end it is the yin that in fact controls everything. It is the very principle of human design that is, that it is the vehicle that is the life. And it is only when we honor the form principle that we have the possibility of being able to operate correctly. And here, of course, we see the form principle, but we don't see the form principle as something pure. I mean, that's, again, we're looking at the form principle in the way in which it is utilized by personality. The way personality tries to influence the form principle. And this is the deepest area where, because we look at this within the context of personality crystal bundles, the faces themselves, that this is where the personality tries, and try is the only way one can say that, tries to influence form. And it is this relationship that in essence is the bedrock to not simply civilization as within the context of the language here, but the homogenized world. This is the foundation of the homogenized world. This is the way in which the personality, remember the sellout of Parvati, and I don't mean to give her such a hard time, but to hell with her, what to do. This is the way in which personality tries to manipulate or influence form. And of course, this is where the battle is that is lost in the homogenized world. That is, the battle of form to stand up to the pressure of the personality. Form doesn't have the same advantages because form does not experience the self-reflected mind. It's the personality that does. It's the personality that interprets what the form is and what its use is and what its use isn't. It's the personality that can decide that a life is worthless and take it. This is the influence of personality on the form principle, and of course, again, chemically, how deep that is in everyone and how deep that is in all of us. But before I get into any kind of general thinking here, I would like to go through and examine some of these continuities because I find them very interesting. And given that we are dealing with the quarter of civilization, let's go the other way this time, and let's take the principle of the yin-yin at the top and the yin-yin at the bottom, because again we're going to be looking for continuity. So the yin-yin at the top and the yin-yin at the bottom, and we have this relationship to the 62nd gate. And again here in the 11th face, again the yin-yin combination top and bottom, and you have the 15th gate, and of course again here the same combination top and bottom, and you have the 16th gate. So you have this process of the 2, the 16, the 15, and the 62. And again, we're talking about the continuity. All of them serve, in a sense, they serve very similar masters, if you will. In other words, they have the common quarter binary at the bottom, and they have the common face binary at the top. That is the gate binary, the common gate binary at the top. So, basically the difference is simply the shifting of the face, but they're all inside of the same quarter. So there's a very powerful continuity between these gates. Now, of course, we know that in talking about the nature of civilization and that it is so dominated by the throat, here you can see that there is this perfect balance between throat and G. That is, you have the 2nd gate in the G center, 15th gate in the G center, and then you have this commonality of the logic side of the throat, that is the 16th gate and the 62nd gate. So let's look at the 2 and the 15 for a moment. They do not have a natural relationship. That is, they don't have a natural relationship in terms of, if you're looking at the 2nd gate, you're thinking incarnation cross as an example, the classics of the G center, the Sphinx and the vessel, you can see that there is a separation here. But it's also interesting to note that since they are all part of, where the life is integrated, the monopole being the source of holding together the design and personality into the illusion, that it is interesting, this genetic commonality between these two particular crosses. And the 15th gate, of course, is the most magnetic. This is a magnetic, if you will, direction, an influence that has, a magnetic influence in terms of direction. This is the pull. And it's interesting to see that they have a very important relationship to each other that normally that you would never see. That is the 2 and the 15. And this relationship specifically, in this context where you have, normally this imbalance of throat domination, and of course here you have this commonality, and you have the 16 and the 62. The 62nd gate is for me it is the gate that establishes the Maya. That is, it is the gate of detail. And the Maya is simply the density of detail. It's the gate of the Word. It's this metamorphic gate that transforms a concept into a concretized, verbalized detail, or the illusion of fact. So it's a 60-second gate that creates the Maya, and skillfully, as one can see. I mean, the 16th gate and its skills. If you look here at this combination, that is the genetic continuity here, you have the skills to bring the Maya as a magnetic direction. Just keynotes, just playing around with keynotes. But again, the more you play around with keynotes, the more you begin to get to the source of the formula, because in fact, these continuities are their own kind of formula. And of course, the continuities don't end here. They're not going to end here at all. That is, there are all kinds of movements that continue as you go around and you look at the wheel. But to see the continuities within the quarter is to understand a very, very deep relationship between these gates. It's like thinking about, a conversation that's going on. And you're somebody that has the second gate. And there are two people talking to you. One's a 35 and one's a 16. Now, who do you think you're going to be naturally more resonant to? Chemistry. It's just interesting to think about it. But it's it's just logical. There's a deeper chemical relationship, that's going to be there between that 2 and that 16 than there will be between the 2 and the 35. It's just like that. It's just chemistry. There's a natural bias. And of course, this is going on throughout the whole body graph, in essence. There are all these hidden relationships that are there. Now, I'm not suggesting for a moment that one gets caught up in that. This is the science of differentiation. It is a responsibility to be able to teach all of this. There was a comment, Stephen's comment before the class about being very satisfied to get to the end of this semester because it's been an incredible load. Many people who are taking many courses, I can empathize with that. But as the science of differentiation, it was always my dream, and it seems to be realizing itself, that somebody who was a professional in human design received a really deep and practical education. And I must say that at this point, anyone who is going to go through any of these 3-year programs after going through introductory training programs and all of that, by the end of that, they're really well educated. And this is part of that process. That is, it's part of understanding that there are many, many ways in which information moves. And, this information is important to recognize. It will be very useful for us. I mean, it'll be useful in order to understand how certain kinds of information moves along at a cellular and deeper at a genetic level. There is obviously an information trail that operates through this 216, 15, 62. It's an information trail. And, it's something that, for example, I do, I'm doing over this semester and next semester, Dream Rave program. And one of the interesting things about Dream Rave is that when you're asleep, you have a 15-gate matrix, which means that when you wake up and you think you remember a dream, it's only because of the fact that out of that 15-gate matrix, information is able to move out and connect to all the other gates. And the way in which it does that is this way. I mean, it's called codon transference. It's done this way. So there is all this information that is moving here. It's not so much, I'm looking at Alok's comments, it's not so much circuits, I see them as currents. I see them as, you can be swimming along in a cold sea and all of a sudden you meet a warm current and, you can, it's there within that sea and it's part of that sea and yet it is a very different current. It's not a stream. It's not a unique body of water. It is just a very similar, in that case, temperature-bound flow. And for me, these are currents of information because it's operating at a chemical level. These are currents of information that are moving through us. And, given that we have this surface knowledge where we can recognize the nature of a gate and what it does because we have used it at an analytical level, it gives us a much deeper understanding of the body graph not as this two-dimensional graphic of points and connections, but seeing the multi-layered living body graph, with all of these currents and streams and, all of this information that is flowing. And part of that is to grasp how profound design crystal consciousness is. That is, the incredible coordination and intelligence that operates these vehicles. And that for the vehicles, these currents are more important than the surface. I mean, the surface is an illusion perception for all of us. If you, in terms of this as genetics, as movement of information, for the design, these currents are very important, and it establishes very important, relationships. It gives the quarter of civilization just by looking at this keystone of it. It's a keystone because, of course, we are, in a yin-yin quarter, and we're dealing with the archetype yin-yin, triple yin-yin in the second gate. That this particular current is instrumental in establishing what civilization is all about. It is that, magnetic direction to skillfully establish the Maya. And to skillfully establish the Maya within the demands of this quarter. And you can see then that when you're looking at the ninth face and you're looking at Maya itself, how interesting it is that, through the current, it actually gets to the gate of Maya. This very beautiful, movement. And you see, on the surface we don't see that. I mean, on the surface we don't normally put any relationship between the 2 and the 15 other than that they're in the G center because they don't have a natural kinship to each other. They don't. We have more of a relationship between the 16 and the 62 because, of course, they're part of the logical stream. But, it's really to grasp that there is something very special that's going on in the genetic continuity, the gate continuity that is underneath. Okay, let's take a look at the next one. And remember, of course, that there are also some, some interesting things in the sense that, I'm not discussing it in terms of, the context of what is the particular codon relationship that that you're getting in these, and of course, to understand what I mean by the gate continuity is that because this is phenylalanine, it's going to have a gate continuity to the 8. They are the same in that sense, which means that the second gate, through its relationship here, to the 15th gate, in fact has a relationship to all of Serene. And it goes on and on and on. In other words, you can begin to grasp that, there's an extraordinary labyrinth of connections that exists between gates. And that at this level of looking at the knowledge, because this is, a very, very deep general view, how important it is for you to see that no gate can only be seen in its most rigid connection, In other words, to, the specific stream it's a part of, or just the specific channel it's a part of. To understand that, we're dealing with those particular aspects as expressions of what ultimately is a whole network of connections that lie underneath. Okay, so here we're looking at the 23, and of course we've changed to having this yin-yang top, so we can see our yin-yang top relationship as it moves through all of this. We have the 23rd gate, the 35th gate, 52nd gate, 56th gate. Now, the interesting thing, of course, here is that in this particular case we have three throat gates, and we have a format. So, we have something very interesting, and something very interesting about this format energy. I mean, again, if you think of this as a current, and you want to think about what is the source of the current, then you end up here. And you end up here because, of course, this is a format. And, the nature of this, keeping still mountain, is this tremendous capacity, to be able to, at the deepest level is acceptance. But it's really about, concentration. It's about the power to concentrate. And of course, in that power to concentrate, we have some interesting things that are to be concentrated on. We have an interesting split here between the logic here, the abstract 35, the abstract 56, and then the individual 23. And all of that operating out of this logical format. This logical format to concentrate on stimulation, to concentrate on progress, to concentrate on explanation. And to concentrate on these things within the form context, after all. I mean, the driving force of civilization. What is the driving force of civilization? It's progress, stimulation, and explanation. I mean, it's a driving force. The influence of the yang on the yin. And of course, you'll notice that the control mechanism in this current, if I can put it that way, is Parvati. And of course, we know that, Parvati ends up putting the burden of civilization on the female. On the yin construct. And of course, it is controlling all of this. So the burden of, moving forward, that burden of being civilized, that burden is placed on the backs of women, as it was. Interesting as well, because you have some interesting codons here. Of course, you have, the 56th gate, which of course is a terminator, and you have the 35th gate, which is a single gate codon. In this combination of leucine and serine, these are very, very singular forces, the 35 and the 56. I mean, they really are. And remember that thing about the 56th gate and, not finding. You can really see the link between the 35, 36 and the 1156. This very strong abstract connection. And you can see the dilemma for both of them. That is, they are locked in, here. This is where the lock is. They are locked into never actually getting the dream of their drive. That is, progress in and of itself is never satisfying. The seeking in and of itself is never satisfying. There is always this, there could be more, there could be something else, and you can see that between the 35 and the 36, there is a very, very deep link between them. And unfortunately, in a sense, because that aspect, which is one of many, many aspects, but it's just one way of looking at it, that aspect is totally controlled by, this access here. That's interesting, the way things work. It's totally controlled by, this is what's got to be concentrated on. So what it means is that civilization is not something that can ever stand still. It's not something in which, progress is anything more than an ongoing movement, that stimulation is nothing more than an ongoing process, that there is no goal. There's none. And the 23rd gate will explain it. Well, I know what that means. It means that this is what life is. That we keep on adapting, that we keep on growing, that we keep on expanding, that we keep on. Interesting to see what currents do, because they have a relationship to each other. They see, the deeper you get into the knowledge, the more you begin to understand that the tiniest of nuance changes things. And the tiniest of nuances can bond things. It's like looking at what happens when you examine the construct down to the base level, and you begin to see these nuances that are incredible, that influence things in many different ways. You see, this is the magic of differentiation, is understanding there's all these little switches at work, that bring out the uniqueness. Think about somebody who has the 23, the 35, and the 52, and they don't have the 56. Now, don't you think they're going to find that attractive? It's only logical, isn't it? And it's not like it's a surface thing, because it's not. It doesn't carry the same power as surface conditioning. But chemically, there's something missing. And you see, that 56, however it operates, is going to be available in the aura of that person, the pheromones of that person. There's some sensory capacity in the other that's going to pick it up. At some chemical level, there is going to be a certain prejudice towards that. Because it's there. So now our yang-yin combination, and of course here it gets interesting, because we have this duplication here. So we have another face, another gate in that sense, that's part of what is in fact this current. Always interesting to look at these relationships. Here we have an incredible mix. The only thing that is, what are we missing? We're missing the abstract. We have the individual 8th gate, and we have the individual 39th gate, and we have the logical 31, and we have the logical 58, and we have the tribal 45. And right away, this relationship between the 31 and the 45 is immediately the most interesting. The most interesting. There's, they represent the two basic ways in which humanity is led. That is the classic leading that we know in the 31st gate, that is the channel of the Alpha, the channel of leadership. But of course the 45th gate, the emperor, the empress, the head of the tribal community. In other words, here you're looking at the power to influence and the power to lead both the tribe and the collective. And this this is something in which you see that, again, there is, in that, there is the provocation and the stimulation that are there from Parvati, that are there in Serene, because of course that's part of it. This is all about making a contribution. You know, the contribution to provoke, and the contribution to have the energy to challenge, you know, to be the leaders. I mean, to be the leaders, this is the contribution that is here. You know, is to influence and lead, to provoke and to challenge. And the provoking and the challenge is the counterpoint to the influencing and the gathering together. In other words, you know, the whole thing is a basic dynamic or tension. And here the rooting is in the 8th gate. You know, this gate of making this contribution. And of course what you get to see is that civilization cannot exist without shepherds, wolves, and sheep. It can't. And that, you know, if we follow this chain, you'll see that ultimately the currents will get back to the 49th gate, and you will see that you cannot have civilization without revolution. And you cannot have leadership without provocation. And it goes on and on and on. They're all there together as this, again, the influence of the personality. I mean, here you can see, because we are, you know, civilization is going to establish the manifesting parameters for the nature of being. It's going to be the throat. And you can see here the hard work of the personality bundles, you know, to influence the way in which the form principle is going to operate holistically. And remember that the personality, the faces, have an advantage in that they're dealing with a not-self mind that will accept this influence. I mean, again, it's something deep to grasp. You know, so it is the mind that is being influenced to see its form principle, to see civilization within these contexts. You know, it's there in its chemistry. That you cannot have anarchy, that you cannot have civilization without order, without leaders, without influence. You know, you cannot have it. You need those tribal forces. You need all of that. It is absolutely essential. And yet at the same time, the energy must be there, you know, to provoke and challenge. And it's interesting, this relationship between the 39 and the 58, that is serene as a whole. That is, you know, in this particular context, you know, this is the quality of serene that is deeply, deeply provocative. The energy to challenge is provocative in its own way. You know, and again, this is something to see about these relationships. You know, this very unusual current between the 58 and the 39. What impact is that having on the 55? If you know what I mean. It brings another quality to the 39. You know, it's just interesting. There are all these, you know, undercurrents, which is very nice in this context of my metaphor. There's all these undercurrents that are there that can lead to all kinds of, very profound speculation about this and that. You see, you'll get to the end of this process where, for example, you can take every 4th gate, and you have a current of 16 operating throughout the whole wheel. You know, because the chemical relationships are there. You know, so there's all these undercurrents that are at work in the chemical context. And one of my favorites, I like this one. I don't know why, but appeals to me. Maybe it's all the Terminators. You can see that this is the relationship here. See this 12, which is related to Mat because it's a Terminator, originates here in Lakshmi. So you can see this very, very strong connection, not simply between, these, what I mean particularly between these two faces. I mean, there is a very strong bond in that sense. I didn't mean to do that, but nonetheless, you know where they are. Okay, so this relationship, the 20 and the 12, obviously individual. The 53, we immediately are back in the format zone, and of course here the 33rd gate. I'm not going to touch this 12 over here because we know now it's in Lakshmi. Okay, so we have a very, very interesting current. And again, one has to understand the influence of Parvati. This is a fantastic influence because of the fact of these, the root format pressures sitting there. It gives them enormous power to influence. And of course, here we can see that this is the influence on the abstract process. In other words, this is the influence on ultimately the way of the human experiential way. And so however this current is going to operate, this current is going to operate with a theme that is going to be deeply related to, this power of this driving force, this pressure for beginnings to start something. And, beginnings in the now. That is, a deeply, deeply spontaneous connection in that sense. Deeply spontaneous. And obviously, you can see that in this context. In other words, both the 12th gate and the 20th gate, individual throat gates, deeply mutative. It's all about pushing mutation. And pushing mutation both in terms of awareness, that is, contemplation and the gateway, and both in terms of being able to mutate others. And the 12th gate is the key gate to the entire throat system. So you're dealing with a very, very powerful force when you're dealing with the 12th gate. That is, we had a mutation about 85 or 90,000 years ago. It's called the dropping of the larynx, and basically the dropping of the larynx, which changed the way we could breathe in relationship to liquids. That is, a baby, for example, can breathe and drink at the same time, and at a certain point the mutation kicks in. They can no longer do that. They start spitting up, as an example, because they're swallowing a lot of air. It is what differentiates us from our primate relatives, that is the dropped larynx. And the fact that, once we mature, we cannot drink and breathe at the same time. And what that actually did was provided a change in the vocal chamber itself. And, most creatures are limited in what is their vocalization and their vocal range. And the dropping of the larynx allowed developing humans to be able to articulate in a way that was to modulate, to be able to produce a variety of sounds and clicks, and all of that, of course, led to the sophistication and the development of language. Everything about the power to communicate is rooted in the 12th gate. And the 12th gate is the most powerful mutative expression that you can find in the throat center. It is the only social channel, that is, it opens up to the only social channel of individuality, the 1222. And of course, this is a social mutative process. In other words, this is a venue through which individuality can mutate the general other, whatever that other may be. So you can see here that everything about the human experiential way, that is, to keep on seeking experience is to meet mutation. I mean, that's the thing that's so fascinating in a sense about the experiential way, is that the experiential way as an abstract process is limited because what it values is what it collects from its experience, that is the past. And yet the experiential way is boring and tedious unless there are rules that change so that horizons are different, so that more can be sought on the experiential way. That is, mutation needs to have its place. So we have this very powerful force in that sense. You also have the 33rd gate, and of course the 33rd gate is the gate of retreat, but it's also the gate of revelation. So one of the things about this, this potential of civilization, and remember we were working backwards here, that in a sense this is the current that is flowing before the end of the quarter. It's back 4 gates in sequence. That here what we're looking at is a drive in the experiential way to socially mutate. And one of the ways that we socially mutate is through revelation. And it's fascinating actually to think about that. But in fact, if you look at the history of civilization, that civilizations have been built on revelations, millennium after millennium, in which, new religious thought, spiritual thought becomes bound with the establishment of a civilization to honor it. Something that, has been historically evident. So, for me it's one of those currents that carries many information. By the way, do not see my my very brief superficial keynoting of these as establishing a set description of these currents. It's much, much deeper. And I can read keynotes anyway. That is, it's just years of experience. And so you end up, I take a particular track like I have today, but I could take a totally different track tomorrow. Not in terms of the current itself, not in terms of essential values, just how to interpret the relationships. Because there are so many relationships to see. This is something to really understand. I mean, it's like understanding that, the moment that you have the social mutation in the now, you have, through leucine, the connection to the explanation. You know what I mean? It goes on and on and on. Aside from the fact that, you've got 6 gates that are serine, that are all going to be part of the influence, chemically speaking, of that format sitting there that is a serine format. And again, you go to a terminator, and of course you've got all that, it goes on and on and on. There are all these relationships that are there. The personality, the not-self mind. You have to be able to see from the complexity of all of this how helpless the not-self mind is to these forces. I mean, helpless. It's the thing to really grasp. The non-self mind has no power over any of this. It's not the surface. It's not like it knows that because there is an underlying current that flows chemically through a particular quarter, that it's being influenced at some very, very deep level to have a slight nuanced prejudice towards this thing or that. It doesn't know any of that. Has no access to it. More profoundly than that, the whole construct in the way in which it looks at the civilization it lives in, the way it looks at the other, the way it looks at the male, or the way it looks at the female, the way it looks at life, all of these things have been influenced, are influenced moment by moment, breath by breath, by the influence on this chemistry underneath. we cannot challenge the gods and win? I mean, I can wag my finger at Parvati and call her bad names. It isn't going to do any good. You know? I mean, it's not like I have any power over that. I do not. You see, my power comes from having broken the covenant. That's where my power comes from. You know, I am not a servant of these forces. I am not obedient. I am not blindly subject to their organization. I am not. You know, I am not. And of course, that's the only difference. Because of course, all of this rules me too. I mean, the way my mind thinks, the way it sees things, looks at things, grasps things, has all been influenced by and remains influenced by my underlying chemistry. It can't, you know, it's just the way that it is. You know, I have the 20th gate, the 23rd gate, and the 2nd gate. I don't have the 8th gate. It's obvious to me that chemically the 8th gate must be interesting to me. You know, there is a connection. You know, and I see that, what am I supposed to do with that? That's neither this nor that. You know, it's just an obvious. You just look at it and you say, okay, well, yeah, that's true. You know, I have the 12th gate. I don't have the 45, the 35, or the 16. You know, I have the 12th gate and the 33rd gate. I have 2 terminators. And the 12th gate, I have 3 terminators. But I don't have the 56. You know, I have 2 sons that have the 56 gate. What does that say? You see, there are all these. Yeah. It's the mystery and the beauty of the knowledge. I mean, this kind of examination for me, that what it is in essence is, I think of it as high art. It's aesthetic. The mechanics are very beautiful. You know, to go beneath the chimera of the body graph, because the body graph is, you know, it's such a thing. But to go beneath that, to see all these intricacies, you know, how beautiful it is, and how it's just a mechanism. I mean, you know, it's like the pleasure I take just by watching this rollover. You know, it's just a rollover. You know, you just see it roll over. You know, you build the base, and then you build the face, and then you put on the gate, and you just roll them across, and then you do it over here. You know, and you change an element. You know, people are always wondering about, you know, the wonder of creation. Yeah, sort of. Normally what we mean is that we like what we see, in the sense that, you know, you come to some beautiful place on the landscape and you look out and it's so gorgeous, and, you know, you think how wonderful creation is. Which is kind of funny when you think about illusion, but nonetheless. See, what I find fascinating is that if you take a basic binary, because that's all this is all binary, it's all built on the binary. If you take a basic binary and you move it long enough, eventually you get this. I mean, that's what's so fascinating. And I know that, you know, when you go back to that basic binary, there is a question. The question is, you know, is there intelligence behind the emergence of the basic binary? One would think so, but I don't know. But I don't see the unraveling of this ultimate, huge seems like, mechanism as so, well, as mysterious. I don't. I mean, it's one of the things that I love about these illustrations. You know, I always talk about human design as being the mechanics of the Maya. Here are the mechanics. You know, this information moving, and these symbols are not just abstracts like in the body graph. They are related to specific chemistries. They can be deconstructed into basic chemical formulas. And then you just get to see the mechanism, one nuance after the other. And when you add up all those nuances, you get complexity and diversity. And you see, human design is deconstructing the totality down into its diversities. All these minute aspects that we have. I mean, you know, for example, the PHS and rave psychology programs that I'm doing now in the second year. Seems deep, no? But you know, it's never gone further than looking at Sun-Earth potentials with a little dabbling of node, you know? There is so much more information, it's mind-boggling. I mean, to see the whole person, to see all the details of the person is part of, you know, the goal of being able to write the differentiated code. You know, my work in all these various levels, whether it's here or in base theory or in any of the programs that I'm doing, is ultimately we're getting to a point where we can write out the differentiated code. You know, map the unique mind, map the unique vehicle, you know, bring it all together into a holistic view, take it down to the chemical level, because it's a science. You know, if it weren't a science, it would be enough to say that the voice said, try this. You know, here's your strategy. You know, God said. But it isn't, you know, it is strategy and authority are a legitimate construct that are built out of a mechanic. You can just see it. And to see how it's built, and to see how it works. And in that, not to take away the beauty in the mystery, but to take away the mystery and just be left with the beauty. You know, it's beautiful. And you see, there's many things to ponder. Nobody has really pondered what these four symbols within the synthesized context of human design really mean. And I don't mean that on the surface, obviously. What we're beginning to learn, you know, what we're beginning to learn about these things by seeing them in this way. But you know, at the same time that you can have all of these yangs running through the center, there's a yang-yang here as well. And there's a generalized value in this formula that's brought forward into this top, you know, because it is this generic. And here we're exploring these generics. We're beginning to see the way in which they operate. Slowly but surely, we're breaking it all down so that we can, we can see the complete mapping. Pretty stuff. Anyway, we've come to the end of our first semester together, and I must say it's been a delight. I also want to say to all of those, because we have, I think there's 28 people that are actually part of this class. So to all of you that have been downloading regularly, I understand the time dilemmas. I also appreciate your participating in the program. And I hopefully look forward to seeing you all back here after we've had a nice break until sometime in the middle of May, where it sort of feels like you want to get back into the classroom again because you miss it. And that's always a better feeling than, geez, I'm glad it's over, I need a break. And anyway, to all of you, thank you. I can't do it without you. Appreciate it. Had a lot of fun. And do enjoy my Monday mornings with you. And until those of you that are going to be in Bisa, I'll see you next week. And for the rest of you, next semester. Bye for now.